Hi, it's Helen Tarrant. Hi, welcome to another episode of Commercial Property Roadshow with Helen Tarrant. Now today I want to answer the question about maintenance. So how much cost is there for maintenance in residential compared to commercial? Now we have a lot of talk about what is it that you need to maintain in commercial, and as a landlord, what do you do in residential? So in commercial, I want you to think big picture. Big picture in terms of what you are responsible for is structural works and the outside of the building, and the internal fit out is actually done by your tenant. So normally what you provide your tenant is a workspace, an area where they can conduct their business, and everything that is involved in how they conduct their business and the logistics around it and the equipment that they need is for them to provide themselves. So you're essentially providing them a bare shell. So if you're providing them an office, you're providing them lighting, carpet, painted office space. Maybe sometimes you might put a partition in there, here or there. Obviously there'll be PowerPoints, data areas or data cabling to it, and of course there's water or gas depending on if you have a kitchenette. So that's the basics of it. If you have a retail premise, what you're providing is your floor coverings, which could be tiles, or could be concrete, polished concrete, or it could be something like vinyl, depending on what your tenants need. Painted, so general painting, neutral colors, and things like probably provide plumbing. You're going to provide some kind of sewerage for their bathrooms, facilities, maybe even a standalone bathroom of their own. You're going to provide your glass front exposure, which is really important, and also a grease trap, so that for them to do cooking and everything, they can use that. And often you would include an exhaust fan. So there's the basic that you would provide. In a warehouse, you could provide obviously a concrete shell, but your higher roller doors, possibly a mezzanine floor, maybe a partitioned office space if it's already part of the structure. If it's not, then you don't need to build it. Obviously individual bathrooms if you can, and amenities, and pretty much that's it. Some basic water and electricity, a three-phase electricity to the actual warehouse. So that's what you provide as a landlord in the commercial space. Now everything internally your tenant will fit out. So if they've got specialist equipment, whether it's a commercial kitchen, whether it's hoists, whether it's specialist desk and ergonomic desks that if they need to work, they're going to have to install all of that. They have to bring that with them. It's part of their maintenance. So you as a landlord, your biggest cost is your structural, and often what comes with that is your what's inside the building. So if it was a air conditioning unit that was already there and you provide it to the tenant, you are responsible for the actual head or the actual plant of it, but your tenant has to actually maintain it every 6 months or so, and that's built into the lease, so there is no additional cost for you. Now obviously if a hailstorm came or typhoon came or any act of God came and it blew off the roof, or it damaged the gutters and there was flooding, now that creates issues for your tenant. Now you're not responsible for their content as such, but you're responsible for fixing that. So fixing the roof, and obviously your insurance will cover that. Gutters, you may need to replace that, and of course if there was flooding of it, you will need to get that sorted out for your tenant, and that may be bringing in drying carpets, replacing carpets, and things like that as well. So that's your maintenance. So in commercial, I like to say that there is no major maintenance, but you should collect money for a rainy day, because you never know when the big act of God things might happen, and it might happen all of a sudden, and all of a sudden you can't get roofers on the roof to fix it, and you might find that your tenant can't operate out of that premise for a week or so. But so you need to get emergency care out there. So in order for you to get emergency care, you might need to have some backup money. So usually I take that as a percentage. So over time, over a 6 to 12 month period, I like to accumulate anywhere between 2% to 5% of the purchase price of the property and put that away as a rainy day for the future. So it's all relatives. If you're buying a $500,000 property, $25,000 in the future for anything else that happens, or if you're buying a $5 million property, then you're going to need something a lot more than that, because the cost will always grow as depends on the price of the property. So that's really your maintenance. Your maintenance is one big off maintenance if that happens, not any of the small things. So you don't have to worry about their appliances breaking, you don't have to worry about toilets being blocked, you don't have to worry about like if any of your tenant stuff breaks. It's not your issue at all. So your tenant fixed all of that. So you're only keeping money for big maintenance costs, and that's also part of your due diligence that you do when you go into a property to make sure there's no major heavy capital costs coming towards you in the next 12 to 24 months, so that you want to be able to have time to be able to accumulate that. Now, in a residential space, what you will find is that there's lots of little costs, less big costs, because you're either buying a house or a strata, which means that you're buying an apartment, which means that your cost is going to be little. So if you're buying an apartment, it's only the walls that you're in that belongs to you, or the space internally. So you've got carpeting, you've got air conditioning, you've got all of the kitchens, and the plumbing and all of that. So any of that breaks, that's actually your issue. So what happens in residential is that lots of little things will break over time. So if you have multiple residential properties, you'll find that the stove might break rotationally, every 6 months from one of your properties. You'll find that the light fittings might not work. You might find that the plumbing might go. You might find that the water heater will go, and the air conditioner needs to be serviced. And you might find that it rained, and then your window's leaking. All of those little things that cost you little bits and pieces start to add up in residential. So they might not hurt you as one-off, but what they will do is start eating away at your cash flow. And there'll be little things. So there'll be things that will be a couple of $100 here or there, a couple of $100, maybe $1,000 to replace this, and it'll happen 2 or 3 times a year in general. But the more properties you have, obviously the more you will get. And if you have a house, that will actually be a little bit bigger, because then you'll be responsible for the roof, you'll be responsible for the gutters, the same like you would in commercial as you would in residential. If you're buying a house, like you buy a freestanding building, you'll be responsible for the decking, you'll be responsible for if your tenant might mow the lawn, or if you have a property that has 4 tenants, it might be your responsibility to mow the lawn as well, to keep it maintained. So these are the things that you got to think about in terms of residential. So there's lots of little costs that add up over time. So what I do is, when you look at a year's comparison, I like to look at a year's comparison and say, okay, commercial, I know I've got no major costs in the next 12 months when I buy into it, because I've done my due diligence, I've checked, I've looked at the roof, I've looked at the plumbing, I've looked at the electricals, I've done the fire checks, I've ticked off everything to make sure everything is done. Now, residential, even though I've done my searches, I've checked through everything, they're not going to be responsible if the stove breaks and I need to replace that. That's $500. If the shower heads needs to be replaced and I need to get a plumber out, and that's another $200. If the light fittings out and I need to get another $200. So those things add up, and they end up being in a year a couple of $1,000. Now, or they might be $5,000. So, but you got to look at what your positive cash flow is and how that eats into it. Does that mean that you're already negative $5,000, and then adding an extra $5,000 or $2,000 even makes you that you have to budget more each week, so that you have enough money to maintain it. So maintenance cost is an ongoing cost, and the way I look at it is that commercial property, it usually nothing happens, and then boom, there is an earthquake. So that's your big capital cost comes in. In residential, you have lots of little bumps. So they don't annoy you. They're not earthquakes that will break you, but it's just lots of little bumps that comes along the way, and they need you to attend to, so it's not totally set and forget. So remember, always look at your costs, not just in buying in, but long-term costs in terms of maintenance, because a property is not something you buy today and decide you're going to sell in 12 months time, but more something you might want to keep in the next 5, 10, 7 or 12 years or forever, because you want to actually reap the benefits of it in the long term. So if you want us to help you look at a strategy, or even do a comparison for you on the residential versus commercial, just reach out to me at helentarrant.com, send me a message through there, and don't forget, hit the bell, hit subscribe, and I'll see you on the next episode. Bye for now.